Let's talk about all this now with the former Conservative Defence Secretary, Sir Ben Wallace. He joins us. A very good morning to you, Sir Ben.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. Let's just talk about, first of all, about Ukraine. We've got a big promise from the British and the French of a commitment to send troops to Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire in Ukraine. First of all, do you think there will be a ceasefire, some sort of deal with Putin? And second of all, do we have any troops to send?
I don't think there'll be a ceasefire. I mean, certainly Putin has been very, very clear throughout, even before the invasion. He will not tolerate, as he sees it, NATO troops on the soil of Ukraine. He doesn't also really recognise Ukraine, but in his view, he's a politician that believes in a sphere of influence. He believes Ukraine is his, and they've been consistent. I mean, you know, in defence of them, they have never changed their view that they want to run Ukraine, that they don't believe the NATO troops should be anywhere near them, and they're not going to give up any ground that they've taken, and they're expecting Zelensky to give up even more ground, including vulnerable. So, you know, we shouldn't be surprised. They also know that Donald Trump doesn't follow through on any of his ultimatums to them. I think he's had 10 ultimatums to Putin so far. Putin rings them up. Nothing happens. Trump starts spouting Russian talking lines, you know, talking points. And so why would Putin do it? I suspect he might play along to see how long it takes for us to get in a tangle about rules of engagement, because you have to work out the details on this. And then, do we have an armed forces that can deploy? Well, you know, you could argue it's the coalition of the unfunded of the three big powers there. I mean, Britain and France aren't funding defence. You know, in my tenure, Britain was number 2 in NATO. We're now down to number 12 in NATO. We're surrendering. In
terms of what? In terms of the absolute numbers or percentage of GDP?
A mixture, both. Percentage of GDP would be one of the main indicators.
But a lot of that's nonsense anyway, because, you know, veterans' pensions, as vital, as important as they are, doesn't actually make us any safer in terms of our defence spending, and yet that's included in our percentage, isn't it?
Well, I think there are some things that I think are reasonable, and remember, most people are comparing like for like. The reason I would say veterans' pensions is, you know, I get soldiers for pensions, right? VAT receipt that George Osborne piled into it. I've never killed anyone with a VAT receipt. It's a total fraud. The Italians were recently trying to fold in a bridge to Sicily. Our new government, or this government, has now added MI6's budget, GCHQ's budget, is trying to put broadband budget into it. In my tenure, they tried to get me to put the costs of asylum seekers into the defence budget and claim it. So it fools no one. It doesn't fool our partners, definitely didn't fool the Americans, and it certainly doesn't fool Putin. So ultimately, as the OBR itself spotted, Keir Starmer hasn't laid any plans out to get to 3.5% GDP.
Why not? Because this is the thing. I've lost track of the number of former defence secretaries. And you were speaking about it, so I know you were speaking about it, you know, at the cabinet table. You were, you know, being very forceful about it when you were in government. You were certainly very vocal about it when you left government. Virtually every single senior military figure, past and even now present, MI6, MI5, everyone is saying the threat is there. We are no longer living in this post, you know, Cold War dividend. Everyone needs to take the threats: Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, the Islamists. We've got to take this stuff seriously. We live in a dangerous world, and we need to up our spending. Why are the politicians only talking the talk and not walking the walk? Because a lot of people are saying we are in the 1930s, 1938 even, and people are not taking the threat seriously. Why not?
Because we have now, in my personal view, we have a generation of politicians who have been brought up on a view that they tell the public everyone's a winner. It's a pain-free way to power. The winner of a general election is the person that says the least, not says the most. And you know, you know, Julia, from your own show, you spend your time on general elections trying to catch us out because you know we're saying nothing.
Promising change.
We've treated the public like infants, you know, slogans like "Stop the Boats." I mean, all of them do it. Nigel Farage is no different. He does it, you know, vote for me on day one. I'll be. No, he won't, right? We don't level with the public. And so when it comes to defence spending, which would be painful to fund, we'd have to cut welfare, or we'd have to cut some of the other things we spend our money on. They don't want to do it. They don't want to say it. And, you know, to lead is to choose. This government has chosen to back down on welfare reform, which could help fund it. They have chosen not to reform the health service. They just bunged it more cash. My government seemed to do a lot of that as well. And fundamentally, we're now in this place where we bizarrely go around Europe telling everyone how dangerous it is, and look ever more hollow. You know, I, as you know, I wasn't always the best team player as a Secretary of State for Defence. I took the view that if I had to have a row, if I had to break some China, I was going to get defence properly funded. And on my watch, I got 31 billion. If you add up all the extras I demanded, it didn't make me popular with colleagues, but ultimately, I have I have the credibility now to say, our forces hollowed out, and we've got to fix it.
Well, this is it. I mean, people pointing out, you know, we've now got more illegal migrants in the country that we're sitting around paying for in you know, houses of multiple occupation or in hotels than our actual, you know, boots on the ground army or military. We've now got these statements from the coalition of the willing to do what we're not sure in Paris yesterday. That big statement from all the leaders, including Keir Starmer, Macron, and Schulz and others. Friedrich Merz, saying basically, you know, Denmark and people of Greenland, they get to decide what happens to Denmark, no one else. But my response to that was, wasn't it, you and whose army? We can't really defend Ukraine without America's help. There's no way we can take on America if America decides to, in whatever way, seize Greenland, is there?
No, and look, I don't think when we say hands off Greenland, first of all, we should say it with clarity. You know, it's pathetic, our response at first. I don't know if you remember yesterday, the junior ministers were doing the media round, and they couldn't even say hands off Denmark. It was reluctantly only when journalists sort of dragged it out of Keir Starmer at a school visit in the afternoon did he say it. This is a major, solid ally that not only supports Britain, but supports America. It deployed hundreds of people to Iraq. It deployed hundreds of people to Afghanistan. It lost lots of people. It's a NATO ally. And let's not forget, Greenland has an American military base on it, right? This is not about security. It's total nonsense. It's about oil, gas, and minerals. You know, America can do whatever it likes around the territories of Greenland, as does NATO. We operate there. We don't just exercise there. We operate. We function together, making sure that the very important choke point called the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, which all the Russian nuclear submarines have to go through, all the Chinese ships, that's monitored, that's surveyed. We do all of that already, right? So this is not about this security. And also Trump will know, well, maybe he won't, but some of his people, that even if he got his way, absorbing a country into the state of the United States takes years, right? I mean, Puerto Rico and places like that haven't even got there. So the idea that Greenland is suddenly going to have a magic wand is also misleading.
But let me put this idea to you, though, because given that we know that there's amazing storage of a supply of vital rare earths that Greenland has, and given the threats that we see from China, blatant open threats from China to Taiwan, where most of our microchips come from, and certainly 90% of the highest grade ones come from, we're in a situation where if there were that invasion, and I've got no doubt that invasion will come in the next few years, frankly, in the Western world, we are going to be in a very, very difficult bind in terms of, your mobile phones, your computers, your electric cars, you name it. Would it not be a good idea that America, rather than, say, China or Russia, was exploiting Greenland's natural resources, which they are failing to do themselves, or the Danish kingdom is failing to do, when we actually are going to need those resources? And actually, it may be in Western worlds and the allies of America like us, it may be in our interest for America to take that country and start actually exploiting those resources.
Well, I think Taiwan's strength in its microchip manufacture is based on two rather odd things. One is it has lots of factories in China, right? It's not entirely on the island. Bizarrely, there are direct flights between Beijing and Taiwan, right? So it's not entirely a sort of North Korean standoff. But secondly, at the moment, there's no evidence that there's that shortage of minerals that need to be requisited from Denmark to make it up. Norway recently discovered huge amounts of rare earth minerals that they will exploit. And I think the other thing to say is, look, it's more likely President Xi will take Taiwan with President Trump's behavior rather than less likely.
Why?
President Trump's national security strategy in November said, I believe in spheres of influence. I don't believe in the traditional post-war Western rules-based system where we are combined by our values, not by might. We adjudicate by values and law and open democracies and freedom. We don't say, I'm biggest, so I'll have it. He's shifted that. He's very clear that the Western Hemisphere is going to be his. He's clear by his actions that he thinks Russia has a sphere of influence in which Ukraine is up for grabs if Putin wants it. So there's one other person who believes in spheres of influence, has President Xi.
Yeah.
He believes the South China Sea is his. He believes Taiwan is his. And now he sees American president, the only man who could really stop him, say, hey, guys, that's what I believe is the way forward.
This is mine, that's yours, is what they're interpreting.
And you've got no leg to stand on. Makes it more likely, not less.
There's been lots of talk about, as you say, that rules-based international order and how the world is collapsing because Donald Trump is, as you say, talking about might, not right. But isn't Donald Trump, and isn't that national security strategy published by the US a couple of months ago, isn't that actually just, basically pointing out the de facto, the reality that has always been the case. And we play along with the niceties with the United Nations and everyone, and the democratic nations pretend it's all about that. But actually, at the end of the day, whoever's got the nuclear weapons, whoever's got the biggest army, whoever's willing to use it, is the one who gets to have the say.
Well, I'm not sure, because what underpins most of our states since the Second World War is the rule-based system in things like the economy, in trade, in
But only
banking.
in democratic countries. Most of the countries in this world are not democratic.
Yeah, so one of the biggest democratic dogs on the block is about to rip that up, right? I mean, what does that mean for sharing information? What does it mean for intellectual property? What does it mean if suddenly America were to choose to steal intellectual property in the same way China does? What would it mean for all the people listening and watching to this program? What would it mean for their jobs, right? So we still do trade along rules. We still have the most ratified international treaty is freedom of navigation, right? What does that mean China doesn't go around boarding our ships and, etc. We all follow a set of rules. It doesn't mean to say we descend into anarchy. We still, in many parts of our lives, have these systems. You try opening a bank account, right? If that all goes out the window in other areas, apart from maybe military might, we are in real trouble in everything we do, right? I mean, and actually America made itself wealthy based on those rules.
Yeah.
And I think one of the jobs of its allies is to point out to America, yes, you can get a short-term gain by moving tanks onto somebody's lawn, but ultimately, as we saw in Iraq, as we saw Russia's invasion of Ukraine, military might isn't enduring in how you survive. And ultimately, Russia has paid a huge price in blood and gold for its ego and its foolhardy invasion of Ukraine. America, by far away the biggest power in the second Iraq war in the world. China was not as powerful then. Look what it cost America. So ultimately, in the long term, this doesn't help any nation.
Very interesting. Just finally, briefly, if you would, I know you've got to go as well, but I mean, do you think that what Donald Trump did on Saturday, seizing Maduro and his wife in Venezuela, and what he subsequently said about Greenland, Colombia, everything, do you think that makes the world a safer or a less safe place?
I think if he'd stopped at rendering Maduro for trial in a independent court for being indicted for drug smuggling and everything else, in my view, I think that's acceptable. I was always challenging the ECHR, that the European Convention on Human Rights prevented me sending people into Syria to capture the Beatles to bring them back for trial. Yep. I mean, we wanted them on trial. We wanted justice to be seen to be done. We wanted the victims their day in court, to be able to look at these people in their eye. But no, I'm not allowed to do that under our current treaties. I'm only allowed to kill them, believe it or not, if there's an imminent threat. And that is ridiculous and needs to be modernized. The bit I'm most concerned about is Venezuela is not that. It's and now we're going to run your country, and we're now going to take your oil and pay for the price we want to pay for it. That's what Putin did in the Donbass, right? So we should be clear where we disagree, and it threatens Britain's national interest. And let's not forget, we have a national interest in all of this. We should be clear. We should be strong. We shouldn't be provocative or aggressive or punchy or hollow. We should just be clear about it and spend time telling our friends in America that, you know, through this path, we're both worse off.
Fascinating. Great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us, Sir Ben Wallace, former Defence Secretary there. Love to hear your thoughts, what he has to say. Going to get Claire's thoughts, get you on the phone lines as well. Give us a call.